So let's say I want to create a sketch. I can just click on this and I can choose any plane I want to create my sketch on. Let's say I'm going to hide these for now and just click on this plane. So you have a sketch here, right? If you press Q on your keyboard, that you can go into your press pull like extrusion commands and you can make solids out of these. And right here below down here, there's like the history. It shows everything that you've like done step by step. And you can go back a step, forward a step. And let's say I added a feature to this. So if I create a new sketch, I can create a sketch on any of these surfaces. And let's say I created this box here. I can go back to extrude, do that. And Fusion like records this. So I can go back in time. And let's say I change the shape of this. So if I made it like wider, Fusion would update the sketch accordingly. And like if I have dimensions, it would remember that as well. Oh, that's constraint. Okay. So I'll go over like the bar, like the interface in the beginning. So this is how you move around. You can, it's like if you left click and drag, that's what you do. Middle mouse is to pan, middle mouse while holding shift is to rotate, and zooming in is just the middle mouse scroll wheel. If you want to look at a particular face, that's what this does. So you can look at that. You can look at, if it's like angled, you can also look at those. Panning, it's obvious. Zooming, and this is for like a window. If you drag a window on your sketch, you can zoom into that area. Next, we have the display settings. The visual style is how you want your objects to look. So there's shaded, which is, it's like if you've used Rhino, that's what it is. I like to keep it on shaded with hidden edges so I can see the object better. Next, we have mesh display, and that's just for working with meshes, which we're not going to get into in this tutorial, excuse me. But you can work with meshes as well if you want to get more in depth. Then we have the environment, which is just how it looks overall. You have effects, which is, there's a lot of things you can go into. I'm not going to explain all of them, but you can add the ground plane, you can add an environment dome just to make things look cooler. You can do a lot of nice renders just straight from the viewport here. Camera, orthographic, or perspective. I'm just going to leave it on orthographic. And that's basically it for this bottom bar. This is, again, your history. So that's good. And then up here is where you will spend most of your time. So you like create a sketch, and when you're in a sketch, Fusion changes this this like menu bar to be like more in line with what you need. So then you have lines, you have rectangles, circles, and yeah, you can basically, it's like AutoCAD. You can create sketches and add dimensions, and you can continue sketches, etc. Next up, I guess we're going to go over this bar right here, what this means. This is your top level component. This houses everything in your design. Then you have your document settings, and here you can change the units. So if you click here, right now we're in millimeters, but we can change this to inches, meters, whatever we want, and we can also set that to the default if you want to. I'm gonna leave it on millimeters, and down here you have named views. So we have the top, front, right, and home. If you were to create like a new view, let's say we wanted this view, just click that, and yeah. Excuse me for that. So yeah, update name view. If you click that, then you have like a new view which you can go into just by clicking on it. Oh, that's weird. Okay, anyways, yeah, so that's the named views. Next you have your origin, which is hidden by default, but you can create like sketches on these. And then you have like the bodies, which are like, this is a body, it's a solid. And you have sketches here, which are, yeah, basically what you've drawn. So we're gonna go over an example. Let's see if I can enable these sketches back. Yeah, so Nick showed us in his class, I don't know if all of you were there, but how to create these like objects with like in Grasshopper. I'm gonna show you how to do this in like Fusion with constraints. Constraints like make it really easy to draft up sketches and ideas. Like if you don't want to write any code, you can just do this. So like it works the same way. It's just using constraints. There's this bridge right here. It's a little slow, but what we have is, so to get started, we'd create a new sketch, and I'll just do it on this plane. We can create shapes here. So if you press S on your keyboard, you can search for a command. I'm going to type in polygon, and you can create a polygon anywhere. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Inscribe polygon, yes. So 8 faces is what we had. Oh, that's the dimension. Okay, that's really small, but that's fine. And then what we're going to do to create this, so remember we had to create one of these faces, so I'm just going to do that, but I'm going to create it outside of the shape, because by default, if you were to create like a line that starts here, you see that little square over there? That basically, Fusion is guessing at constraints, which are everything here. Constraints basically lock your lines into place in relation to other objects. And right now we don't really want any constraints. We're just going to create this freely. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete this constraint. When I created this triangle, Fusion guessed at this horizontal constraint, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is instead, we're going to make this line parallel to this line. And to do that, we go into constraints, go into parallel, select the top line, select the bottom line. And now you can move this around, but this line stays parallel. And then finally, we want to create, make sure this line is equal to that line. So click that, click that. So now it still moves around a lot, but these are more or less constrained somewhat. To continue constraining it, I'm going to add an equality to this and this. And finally, I think I'm going to add, so I'm going to make a construction line by just creating a regular line up to the midpoint. So you see this little triangle. I don't know why I keep pointing to my screen. But you see this triangle, if you click there, this line is now constrained to the midpoint and also to the center. And if you click on the line and press X, that will make it a construction line. So you can't really select it unless you click on, excuse me. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is, again, do the same thing to this triangle, make it a construction line, and I'm going to make it equal, this line equal to that line, so that this would basically fit here if it were to, but I'm not going to draw it in there. So the final step to get this started is I'm just going to make this whole shape a construction shape by double clicking on it and then pressing X. So now I can't yeah, so that's fine. And then we can add a final constraint, which is collinear. Click on that, click on that. Now you can see that it moves along this this axis. Basically in Grasshopper, that was the vector it moved along. So we're basically done here. We just need to add, we need to array this around the center point. So to do that, press S again, type in mirror, or actually type in circular pattern. Then select your objects. So the circular pattern command is looking for 4 things here. So first of all, we need to select the objects that we're going to array. So you just double click that, that's for your triangle. And we also need this center point here, center line. Your center point is going to be the center point, obviously. And over here in this menu, you can leave the rest the same, but on this menu is how many triangles do we want? Remember we had a 8-sided shape, but this actually looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, well, it's a 6-sided shape. That's fine. It would still work the same, but make sure this number is the same as how many sides you have. So once you hit OK, Fusion is smart enough to, should be smart enough to recognize the constraints from before. And if you drag this around, you can see that it works the same, but it's super simple, just drawing lines and adding relationships using constraints. So that's constraints. Does anybody have any questions about constraints?
I kind of just wanted to ask, what does making it like a construction shape do?
Oh, yeah, good question. So for example, let's go, if we have a rectangle that we drew up like this, and I added a line across it, if I go and try to extrude this shape, I have 2 options here. There's 2 different things I can do because there's a solid line in between. But if you were to go into that sketch again and make this center line a construction line, then when you go to extrude it, you'd only have that option. So a construction line helps you make the shape, but it won't show up when you're trying to make it 3D, so it doesn't get in the way.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of like a guideline then?
Exactly. In AutoCAD, in AutoCAD, Rhino, you probably would use this as a guideline, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions about constraints before we head into our example? Okay, all right. So let's delete all of this. I think I saved it. No, I didn't. Oh, well, we're gonna make a pencil case using parametric design and using a hinge and everything. So to get started, we're gonna start with a sketch on the front plane. So again, this here, if you've used other 3D programs, you know this as the cube that you move your object around. The front face is where we're going to start, and we clicked on sketch, so we're just gonna click that and start off with creating a rectangle for the bottom half of our box. Oh man, I wonder why I didn't save it, because I did it last night and oh, here it is. Okay, yeah, you know what, that's fine, yeah. So your box will end up looking like this. That's the end result. Yeah. Okay, so we're starting off at the front edge. We're basically drawing this side of it. So we're going to give it some dimensions. Once we drew the rectangle, you can see it moves around. We don't want that. We want it to fix it in place. And also, we want these lines to be white instead of blue. So that means they're fully constrained. So if you press D on your keyboard, or if you go into, I guess, yeah, sketch dimension, I'm going to add a dimension. Let's call it, let's put it like 20 millimeters for the height. And for the depth, let's say 45. So there's that. You can add dimensions like that, but if you go back into your dimension hover, you can see it added a name for the dimension. It's called D40, and that's fine if you can remember that, but I want to add my own name for this dimension, so I'm just going to call it half height, and then what you can do is press equal sign and then your number, so then it remembers this number as a variable called half height, so that if you want to like go in, oops, what happened here? Yeah, if you want to go in here and make this proportional to the half height, you can say depth is equal to half height times 2. And if you do that, if you change this number to like 30, this is a function now. It will change accordingly. Yeah, so let's leave it like that for now. This is, by the way, called depth because that's what we typed it in as. Finish our sketch. Oh, before we do any of this, actually, I forgot to tell you about components, which is very important. Components will keep your drawings and objects grouped together so it's not all over the place. To do that, let me just delete this whole file. Yeah, there we go. Right click on your top level component and go here, new component, give it a name. I'm going to call it bottom for the bottom piece. The rest of these options you can keep the same. If you go into, now you see this little circle here, this appears for the item that's active. The top level component is active, so that's there. If I were to select the bottom one, that's what it would look like. Let's create our sketch again in the front face. Put the dimension, so I said half height 20. Let's put the depth to, instead of a relationship, we're just going to put a number here, say 50 millimeters. Okay, that's cool. Finish our sketch, go into extrude, click on that, and now add the length of our box. Let's say 150. I don't really know how long my pencils are, but 150 seems to be a good number. The rest of these options you can leave the same. So now we have the bottom half, which is basically this part, but it's not hollow. We want to make it hollow. So there's two ways you can go about doing this. The first is in the solid tab in modify. If you go into shell, click on the top surface, add an offset. You can add it automatically adds like a shell of a thickness of 2 millimeters all around your shape. You can hit OK and you can get started with that. But the better way to do this would be to create a sketch on top of this, then project the lines around it using the project command. So type in P on your keyboard. The geometry it's asking is, yeah, so the selection filter. You can either project entire bodies, which would basically project the silhouette of it, or you can select individual lines. By the way, if you have any questions at any point, just interrupt me. So I can select each of these lines individually, or I can just select, click on the middle here, oops, and it would project everything here as well. Then I would type in offset with the O key. So again, you can just type in O, or if you type in S and search for offset, you can also find your, like all the commands here by searching for them. So if I select here, type in my offset, which is again 2, but in this case, it's going to be -2. And I'm done with that. Now I can go into, okay, we can finish the sketch, go into the extrude command, click on the inside here, and I can drag it down to make the shell. It would look the same, but it's not parametric because the depth here is a number. What we want to do is go into, so the start is fine. It starts off at the plane I drew the square at, the offset, which is the correct plane. The direction is one side, that's fine. Extent, now instead of distance, I'm going to go with to object, and then it's asking me to select an object, and I'm going to select the bottom here. When I do that, it just goes all the way through. So if I were to hit OK, it just goes all the way through. But what we need to do is actually add an offset of 2 millimeters. Oh, not 2, it's actually going to be -2 millimeters. So that it adds like the depth, like it's all around 2 millimeters. And I just noticed that I typed these up without having to add a dimension, a thickness. Since we're working with parametric design, I'm going to say this is the box thickness, and then we'll say it's 2 millimeters. Okay, that's good. And then when we go back and finish that sketch, what happened here? Okay, something happened with her square. Yeah, I think I didn't add the dimensions here. Anyways, if I go back here, looks like the profile, it accidentally selected the outside as well. So you'll see how there's 2 selected. I'm just going to deselect that by clicking on it and hit OK. Oh, now everything disappeared. Okay, I'm going to redo that. Click on the sketch, project, offset -2, but remember it's thickness. Okay, and press Q for extrude. Click on that. Go into to object. And for offset, we're going to say negative thickness. And if it goes through, just put in, yeah, there we go. Change the direction by adding the negative sign. So yeah, now we have our box. What we're going to do next is add the fillets for the, because it looks very boring right now. I just want to make it like smooth it up, basically. To do that, so you're going to use the fillet command by pressing F. But instead of having to select every edge individually, because we're going to be adding fillets to every one of these edges, you can go up here into the selection filters. So if you go into selection filters, when you're just in the general workspace, this has a lot of filters you can go through. But if you're in the fillet workspace by pressing F, if you go back in, Fusion is smart enough to know that you only want these features involved. Like these are the filters that are important to you. So the filters I need are body edges. So I'm going to select that, but deselect everything else. Now, if I just drag over it, it selects only the edges. But I don't want the top ones, so I'm just going to deselect them by control clicking. So holding control and clicking. Okay, so now we have all of our edges that we want. We can just type in a number here and watch the fillet happen in real time. So if you put in 5, 7, I think 7 is a good number just to work with. That looks pretty good. This corner type here, you can choose as well. There's like 2 types. I like to keep it on rolling ball. I guess it's just by default, that's what it is. Yeah, once you do that, just hit OK, and you have the fillet for the bottom of the box. To create the top now, we're going to move forward. Basically, we're going to mirror this on top of itself. To do that, again, if you type in S, you can search for commands here. Look for the mirror command. Select that. For the pattern type, select components, because this right here, it's called a component. These are bodies, so every component can have more than one body in it. And the component also has sketches which created those bodies. I could have done bodies, but I just want to create a whole new component while I'm mirroring, so I'm just going to go with components here. Click on the bottom component, so it selects that automatically. And for your mirror plane, you just select the top surface of your box. If this wasn't flat, you can construct your own offset planes. I'll show you how to do that in the next step. But since this is flat, it makes our life easier. So just click OK. And yeah, now we have a bottom mirror. I'm just going to double click that to change the name. Let's call it top. And if you go back in here, so this is a mirror of the bottom piece here. Okay, cool. Next up, we're going to be creating a hinge mechanism. So this part right here. And to start it off, since this hinge is common to both the top and the bottom, I'm going to start it on the top level component. So if I was in here, I would be only working in the bottom. If I was in here, I'd be working at the top. But if I click this, I'm now in the top level component. So I'm going to create a new sketch, put it on either of these faces. That's where I'm going to start. Then I'm going to project the to-do body so that I have some lines to work with. So I'm going to select bodies from here, click this, and hit OK. So you have now lines you can work with. Okay, the first step is to create a hinge, like the pin around which the hinge would work with. So the pin size, its diameter of the pin, I'm just going to say 4 millimeters. It's a random number, but, and you know what, to be really good about this, let's just put in a dimension, a variable pin diameter. How are we on time? Okay, it's been half an hour. Okay. Yeah. So that's our pin, but now it's like moving around in space. We don't want it to move around in space. To fix that, we're going to go back into our constraints, and so the constraint that looks to be like works the best right here would be coincidence. You could use different ones, but I'm going to be using coincident. What it does, it like locks a certain point either on a line or on a certain point. So if you click on this point and this point, it would fix this circle so that it can't move around. But if you were to select the point here and click on this line, it would only lock it in this X plane. So you can't go up or down, you can go side to side. To prevent it from going side to side, I can add a dimension. But if I just were to create a dimension to this edge here, the dimension starts from the center, and we actually want to start from the edge here. I'll show you later why. So if I right click on, while I have dimension selected, if I right click and go into, oops. Okay, so dimension, where am I? Okay, something has happened. Okay, let's go back in this sketch again. Oh, I exited the sketch, that's why. So if I press D and I come on, edit sketch, press D, right click, yeah. If you go on circle tangent, you can select the edge of this circle and the edge of the shape and add your dimension. Let's give it a dimension of 2. I'm not going to really add a title, like a variable here, because that's fine. And then next up, I'm going to add a housing for the pin. So that will be done through an offset of, let's say, 1.5. So this is the pin, and this is where the pin is going to like rotate around. Next up, we're going to connect this housing to our like both of these top and bottom, and this little line here will separate them. So right now, these two circles are white, and this line is white, so we're good like over here. But we need to constrain these lines so that they don't move around. So the first step I'm going to do is use a tangent. Click on the circle, click on this line to create a tangency between that. So like it doesn't move around on the circle anymore. It can still move around here, but the circle part, it's locked in place. I'm going to do that again for the bottom right here. And finally, what I'm going to do is add a dimension between these two lines, and let's say 15. So now I've added this dimension, but it's still not fully constrained because it still moves around like this. So the next step is to add another constraint called symmetry. Click on this point, and it's going to be symmetric along the center point here. And once you do that, you have this shape here, this shape here. It's all constrained and locked into place. Finish the sketch, and let's start on the top. Let's start on the bottom. So now we're already in the bottom workspace. That's fine. If you press Q or go into extrude, select this and this for the hinge mechanism on the bottom. You can actually, so if you drag this, you can kind of see what I'm like going for. I'm going for this bottom part right here, like, or this top part. It could be either or, but it's just going to touch, it's going to connect to the bottom portion. But the positioning is all wrong. And to fix that, I'm going to change some of these parameters. So I've chosen the right profiles, but my start position is like where I drew the hinge. That's wrong. So we need to like go into offset, add an offset of, let's say 10, but instead of 10, it's going to be negative 10. Yeah, I like where that starts. And my distance, let's say 10, but instead of 10, it's going to be negative 10. So I think that looks good now. I can add dimensions to these. I just don't know what I would call them. I guess the hinge width. Cool. Yeah, so that I can remember that later down the road. So we have one side. To mirror to the other side, we can use, again, the mirror command. But what we are missing is the plane around which we mirror. To create that, if you go into this tab right here, construct, there's an option for a mid-plane. And to create that, you just click on each side, and it automatically creates a plane in the center for you. So now if you go into mirror, this time, instead of components, or pattern type will be features. You can select this whole feature. It won't select everything else. And then if you add your mirror plane, select this plane, which we just created. And you have 3 options here. Normally, the one that's set by default works, but if it doesn't mirror your object correctly, you can just mess around with those. But that looks good. And also, when I created this shape, by the way, you see how the operation was join. If this was new body, then in your bottom component, you would have like 3 separate bodies, and these won't really be connected. So if you added a fillet here, it kind of goes like into itself. And we don't want that. So if you go back in time and change it to join again, so now I can add fillets like properly. And also, like I was just demonstrating the power of the track right here. You can go back in time and change anything, and you're drawing in the future or your present, it changes accordingly. It's like time travel. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so now I'm going to go back to the top here and finish creating the top hinge. So since this is from the bottom, I'm just going to create these 2 little things. And it's the same thing. You have to make sure this is not hidden. The sketch is hidden like by default when you create something on it. Fusion thinks you're done with it, so it just hides it. But for this top part, I need these 2 profiles. And our start will not be the profile plane. It won't be the offset plane either. Instead, we're going to start from an object. And the object is this face. So we click that, and now we can add a distance of, let's say, 2. This is the thickness of our, this is going to be the thickness of our top hinge. Hit OK, and we're done with one side. And then to do the other side, we're just going to do it again instead of mirroring it, because I have to create a construction plane. So right here like that, and then distance will be 2. Actually, it'll be negative 2. And once that's done, yeah, so that looks pretty good. Yeah, so again, we're going to mirror the 2 sides. Again, go into features, select this. Oops, not the whole thing. Select just this. If it's any easier, you can hide the bottom layer. So components, in a way, they work as layers. Yeah, and then the mirror plane, I have to show my bottom face again because the mirror plane's on this. Cool. Hit OK, and yeah, we're basically done with the overall shape. Let's hide some sketches and construction planes just to make it look a little bit better. Yeah, so that's essentially done. But now we're going to add a joint so that it can move around like that. To do that, you just go up here into Assemble, and you have an option here. And it's asking for the first component. So I'm going to hide the bottom. Actually, I'm going to hide the top for now. And I'll select this ring. Then I will show the bottom, show the top, and select this ring, which is basically would be in contact. If I show both now, Fusion has, I think so if you hit OK at this step, there's a joint here you can see, but nothing's moving, or it's all moving together. And that's because by default, the joint Fusion creates is a rigid joint. What we really want is a revolute joint. Once you do that, you can already see that it guessed correctly what axis we're going to rotate against around, but yeah, it's working. Hit OK, and then the next step would be to basically ground one of these two components, because when we try to drag this to open, it moves the whole shape. So I'm going to ground the bottom by right-clicking here and selecting ground. So I'm just going to go back a few steps because I moved it around and Fusion didn't like that. Yeah, so that's good. And if I go here, ground, yeah, you know what? Let's just hit continue here. Cool. Now I can't move this around, but I can now, like when I click and drag it,